Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. I'm going to talk about the coronavirus. I'm going to tell you guys there's math here. A lot of math involved in this. And there's what's called the R naught factor in the coronavirus. This coronavirus, Los Alamos Laboratories did a paper on it. And I guess it was not peer reviewed, but it's Los Alamos, a very reputable laboratory, and they said that the R naught could be up like really high. I think they quoted like 6 point something. It could be, and I tend to believe that it's that or even higher if you were to not do anything. If you were to ignore the virus and let people just walk around coughing everywhere, nobody did any social distancing, it would be extremely high. I don't know, maybe 7 or something like that. Really, really abnormally high. And this virus, if you did that, if you just ignored it like it didn't exist and let it just go through the population at its own speed, they said that it would double like every 2 point something days. And of course, just doing the math, that means in a month or so, or maybe 2 months, I don't know, very, very short period of time from now, before spring even gets here, if you just let it go and ignored it and let everybody spread it, it would infect almost everybody on Earth in a matter of just like boom, like that. But every time you do social distancing in any way, you slow down that R naught value and you bring it down. Now, according to the figures I'm getting, this is with all of our efforts around the world to contain it, its R naught is somewhere around 2. Even still, we've brought it down from like probably 7 or 6.7 or something, like whatever high it normally is if you just ignored it and let it spread. But with all of our efforts, we're bringing that R naught down to like 2. But the flu, its R naught, if you just let it spread, its R naught is 1.35. That's your ordinary common flu, like H1N1 or whatever. Its R naught is like 1.35. This thing's R naught is higher than the flu, even with all of our efforts to contain it. And we can see evidence of this clearly demonstrated by how quickly it's spreading around the world with the world's efforts of everything they got to try to contain it. I'm going to talk about China for a second. China has been successful. They've got the R naught down under 1. How did they do it? And I believe, truthfully, they've been successful. How they did it is they basically declared martial law. They declared war against the virus. And they strictly enforced keeping every single person resident of that city of 11 million people inside their homes and wouldn't let them leave their homes. What happens when you do that? I'll tell you what happens. This virus, as contagious as it is, cannot work miracles. It has to spread, like when you go to the market to buy something, you catch it. It has to spread. You go someplace and you associate with other people, you catch it. But if you're staying at home, neither can you spread it, neither can you catch it. So if one person has it in the family, they might spread it to the other people in that family, but if they're all isolated in their house, they're not going to spread it to the family next door. This is how the Chinese contained it. Roughly, if you can do that for 30 days, or maybe 40 days, 30 to 40 days, if you do that, and you absolutely make sure nobody leaves their homes, the virus will spontaneously disappear. Because what you've done is you've broken the line of transmission. And I do believe that the Chinese have done just that. But the big question mark is could we enforce something like that in Western countries where we have more we have more laws of of uh, written right into our constitutions of people have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to uh, leave your home, basically. Because if you lock somebody inside their home and you post a guard, you're gonna arrest them at the very least if they leave their home. What does that do to our constitutional rights? You know what I mean? But it works. And the opposite side of this is, what happens if you don't do that? Well, then, if you don't do that, the R value stays up about 2 or higher, which means you're not really stopping the virus. All you're doing is slowing it down, because if the R naught was like up to where it normally is, like 7, it would spread through the population so fast, just like that. Just like when you, like a fire, a grass fire. It would move through the population. And what it would do is it would overwhelm our hospital systems and our medical care systems. It would overwhelm everything. Everybody would be sick at the same time. It basically would shut down the entire everything. But with an R naught of 2, it's still going to do that, albeit a little bit slower. It's going to ease it back a little bit, but it's still going to be a huge flood at a certain point with an R naught of 2, because that means that every person that has it is spreading it to 2 people. The flu's not even that contagious. The flu is 1.38, meaning each person that has it spreads it to 1.38 people. Almost, well, 1.5 people, say. This spreads it to 2 people. Each person has it. So moving faster than the flu, even when you're slowing it down. This thing moves unbelievably fast through the population. So with an R naught of 2, you've got to get that R naught down to 1 or less, meaning that each person that catches it spreads it to 1 or less people. Then the thing starts to disappear. Okay? With an R naught of 2, or 2.2 or 2.4, I think the really successful countries right now are getting it down to like 1.8 or 1.6. The countries that are really doing contact tracing and everything just right. Here in Canada, they're doing pretty good because our numbers are still kind of low, so they probably got the R naught down around 1.6, 1.8. And that's good considering how fast this virus actually moves. But if you don't shut this virus down, this virus is going to shut your country down. Because even with an R naught of 2, or 2.2, you just have to do the math to realize that each cycle of the virus, which probably lasts 2 or 3 weeks, that one person is going to spread to 2 people. That means in probably 2 weeks or sooner, each 2-week cycle period of the virus, it's going to double. And that doubling is called an exponential. Our brains have problem getting around exponentials. But quite simply what it means is that it will still shut, even at 2 or 2.2, you're not slowing that curve down enough where you're still going to flood your medical system. It's just going to take a little bit longer for it to get up to those exponential increase. The only way to really contain this virus is to contain it. And the only way is to follow the model of the Chinese. Now, I'm not recommending we do that in the Western world because of our freedoms and our rights. But the Chinese have found a way to stop it. And at a certain point, when it starts to actually shut your country down, or shut a country down, you have to start considering what the Chinese did to stop it. But how far are you going to let it progress before you finally say, hey, you know what? What are we going to do? How far do you let it progress? Because the ultimate conclusion of this is the virus will keep progressing until it reaches probably around 70 to 90% of the population have had it already. And then it'll disappear on its own because it breaks its own line of transmission between, it breaks it's not able to transmit between people effectively anymore because most people have had it and got over it. At that point, the virus will spontaneously disappear on its own because this virus has to keep moving in order for it to survive. It has to keep infecting new people in order for it to survive. So I would say that this virus is not going to hang around very long, but it's going to cause absolutely devastating damage to the countries where it's seeded itself. The best thing to have done would be not to have let this thing seed itself, to take the precautionary measures needed to stop it from entering your country in the first place. Because once it seeds itself and establishes itself, it uses a method of transmission called asymptomatic carriers of the virus. And I've been talking about this going way back, over a month ago. I was talking about these asymptomatic carriers of the virus. That they're not showing any symptoms. They don't have a fever or anything. And this is how this virus has slipped through and seeded itself. But the real way to stop it would be to stop all traffic coming in or out of your country, if you don't want it in your country. But once it's there, once it's established itself in your country, at what point? It's almost pointless then to once it starts spreading amongst the population inside your country, it's almost pointless at that point to close everything, to close all the borders and everything. At that point, the only way to get rid of it, really, is to follow China's model. And if it shuts your country down enough, in the end, out of desperation, your country probably will follow China's model regardless. I'm just saying, guys, just saying, that at a certain point when it starts to shut everything down, the medical system and everything else, out of desperation, now probably a country will probably, now I'm just saying, will probably declare martial law and follow China's model at a certain point because they'd be forced into it. It's either that or let it run its course, which is probably 80 to 90% of the population falls ill, and you're going to have, out of that 80 to 90% of the population, you're going to have about 10% to 15%, depending on the demographics of the aging population, that are going to need urgent medical assistance. And if they don't receive that urgent medical assistance, that 10 to 15% of the population, you're going to get a high percentage of that population that are going to die if they do not receive that medical attention. In other words, respirators, oxygen, etc. Okay? So your percentage of the virus, if it were to move into the perfect world with a perfect country with a perfect medical system, a country that had a hospital on every street corner with 1,000 beds in it, a fictitious country I'm making up right now, and they had 1 million respirators ready to go, that country could probably recover most of that 10% of the population that would need urgent medical assistance. Right? But if your hospital system gets overwhelmed to where those people are not going to receive medical assistance, that 10%, then probably half of them are going to succumb to the disease, which is probably 5 to 7%. Now, the Spanish flu killed, I think it was 2-point-something%. This thing, if it overwhelms your medical system, it's going to move that notch up, that bar up, to probably maybe 5 to 6% of the population. So this virus is definitely not the flu. In a perfect world with a perfect medical system, with a demographic of very few aged people in the population, So if you had a fictitious country where most of the people were only 20 to 30 years old and there was no old people in the country, nobody over the age of 40, for instance, and you had a wonderful medical system with hospital on every street corner with thousands of respirators, thousands of beds, thousands of nurses ready to go so that each person would receive ultimate care. In a country like that, the mortality rate of this disease would probably be much less than 1%. But if you've got a country that's medical system is going to get overwhelmed and has a high demographic of the aged population who's, say, over the age of 65, then you're looking at a country that mortality rate is going to go up significantly, probably up close to 5% or maybe even higher. And then if you take into consideration that it could actually stop the economy for a period of time, and there could be logistical problems in getting resources to the people, like shortages of food, shortages of water, then other diseases could take over that normally wouldn't stand a chance. But, diseases like cholera, a whole wide range of other diseases that are opportunistic. And if your country has a large population of homeless, well, then you've got a disaster on your hands, a total, absolute disaster. And so this is what I see, and this is what I'm reporting on. Thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.